Brexit talks, the Irish Prime Minister warns time's running out for negotiations in Brussels. The Royal Bank of Scotland considers moving part of its business to Amsterdam after Britain leaves the EU. Also today, police in Australia say an attempted airline bombing was ordered by a senior Islamic State commander. The investigation into Russian meddling in last year's US election takes its first steps towards potential criminal charges. Moped muggings. Sky News hears how police have become wary of taking action. And in the sport, the world's most expensive footballer Neymar completes a move to Saint-Germain. A very good afternoon to you. The new Irish Prime Minister has piled pressure on the British government's Brexit negotiations. He said time's running out for both sides to agree the first stage on talks on the divorce before moving on to stage 2 in October. He also called for unique solutions as he warned that every single aspect of life in Northern Ireland would be affected by Brexit.
The Brexit negotiations are now well underway in Brussels, made by them, but I do not underestimate for a second the enormity of the challenges that we face.
Now, in his speech, he suggested a number of possible solutions to some of the negotiations' sticking points. First off, he suggested that a specific EU-UK customs union should be created, similar to the one that exists between the EU and Turkey. He also suggested the UK could enter what he described as a deep free trade agreement with the EU. And finally, he said an alternative to the European Court of Justice could be created to oversee any future deal between the EU and the UK. Well, our senior correspondent David Bowden is in Belfast for us.
It's pretty clear that the new Taoiseach wants it to say Brexit on the tin.
David Bowden reporting there. Now, the husband of a British Iranian woman imprisoned in Tehran has spoken of his hopes for her freedom as a senior Foreign Office minister visits the country. Alistair Burt will be holding talks with Iranian politicians and is due to raise the case of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe.
I've had various complaints about the government. I think they sincerely care, and I think that Minister Burt has been very genuine in his concern. But yeah, my complaints have always been that they've never spoken out and criticised her treatment. They've never said that she was innocent, and they've never publicly called for her release. So those are three things that I keep pressing for them to do.
And you can hear the full interview of that later on this hour. Now, the Royal Bank of Scotland is in discussions about moving some of its operations to Amsterdam following Brexit, if the UK can't ensure money can flow easily from London to Europe. It comes as the taxpayer-owned bank reports its first half-yearly profit for 3 years.
My focus is around how do we get those UK businesses who are trading in the European zone and those European businesses who want to trade over here. What we've signalled today is if there is a situation where we don't have what we call passporting, where it's the same arrangements each side, Europe versus the UK, we'll put an operation into Amsterdam to make sure our customers continue to be able to do business with us seamlessly.
17 miners are missing after a diamond mine suffered flooding in Russia. 151 people were working at the site in Mirny in eastern Siberia when water flooded into the shaft from an open-cast mine above it. The mine is one of the largest diamond deposits owned by the state-controlled Alrosa company. A fourth consecutive fall in new car sales is being blamed on uncertainty over Brexit and the government's plans to boost air quality. The Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders reported a year-on-year decline of 9% in July. That means just under 162,000 new models were sold, putting sales at just over 2% down when compared to the same period last year. One of Dubai's tallest residential buildings had to be evacuated this morning because of a fire. Hundreds of residents were forced to leave the Torch Tower, which has 86 floors, but no one's believed to have been injured in the blaze. It's the second time the tower has caught fire in 2 years. British Airways, EasyJet and Ryanair have all alerted passengers to the need to turn up to airports earlier than normal because of delays at EU border controls. BA is sending text messages to passengers flying back from airports where long queues are expected. The delays are due to new security measures for non-Schengen countries brought in after the terror attacks in Paris and Brussels. The government's pledged an extra £100 million in support to help rid the world of polio. The wild polio virus still exists in Afghanistan, Nigeria and Pakistan. The money will help immunise up to 45 million children each year until 2020, when it's hoped the disease will be eradicated. A new study has found a way to potentially identify women at high risk of having breast cancer relapses. The findings, published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute, suggest that women with high numbers of so-called immune cell hotspots around tumours could be 25% more likely to see their tumours return within 10 years. A police officer in Texas has had a lucky escape during a routine traffic stop. Here is that dramatic footage, and in the dash camera video, Officer Matthew Lessel can be seen walking to the car. He's pulled over just before a second car crashes into him. Incredibly, Lessel can be seen getting right back up after the crash, and local media reported that the driver of the second vehicle was later charged with drunk driving. Incredible footage there. Now, today is the deadline for survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire to submit their evidence to the public inquiry. Survivors have told Sky News that criminal investigation is their priority, which could see the inquiry delayed if a prosecution goes ahead. Well, earlier we spoke to Councillor Robert Atkinson, leader of the Labour group of Kensington and Chelsea Council, who said the government needed to ensure the inquiry's scope was large.
We don't just want to be looking at the immediate physical causes, we want to know the context in which the contracts were let in the first place.
Well, I'm pleased to say we're joined now by Samia Badani. She is the chair of Bramley House Residents Association, and she joins us from our central London studio. First of all, what do you think should be the terms of any inquiry?
We believe that it should be broad enough to look at the relationship between the local authority, public authorities and residents. We strongly believe that this inquiry must look at all the causes of the fire, and we believe that it was partly caused by a history of systematic neglect, contempt and discrimination against people on low pay, the vulnerable, people from black and ethnic minorities. So we need to look at this relationship.
And are residents adamant that they want to see criminal charges brought?
No, absolutely, but we also understand that unless we change the law, unless we change that system that discriminates against vulnerable people and people from different backgrounds, no matter how many people you prosecute, you will have another Grenfell. So we need to have a broader view on what needs to change so this tragedy never happens again.
And are people feeling that this inquiry will give them answers? What's the feeling on the ground now, nearly 2 months on?
Well, we would have confidence if the judge would consider appointing a panel of experts, people who have worked with our community or representatives of our community. But if that's not the case, I think we'll have little confidence in the successful outcome of this inquiry.
And you must have had contact with many of the people affected. Where are we now in the rehousing situation? Because I understand some people still haven't been given alternative accommodation.
Well, we formed a Kensington Residents Alliance, which is an alliance of residents who are in some survivors and people from different estates, and we will be sending an open letter. We're very concerned that it's been 7 weeks and you've got families in bed and breakfast, and the survivors are treated like second-class citizens, while the law says that families shouldn't be in bed and breakfast for longer than 6 weeks. So we don't know what's happening.
And where would you like to see things go from here then?
Well, what we would like is a real engagement. I think on the 14th of June, our community showed its credential that we're able to deliver a service. So we ask for local authority to co-plan and co-deliver the services with the community.
And can you talk us through any personal stories of people that you've spoken to on the ground who are still inevitably experiencing so many difficulties after what they've been through?
No, absolutely. I think people are affected in many ways, and I think I hear stories of people having flashback, people who can't sleep at night, people being exhausted because they are dragged in different directions, they have to go to meetings, and we expect people who have been traumatized to make very important decisions. So it's not working as well as we would have hoped, and we need to see better strategies from those who are making decisions.
And we are now, of course, nearly 2 months on. Do you think people feel confident that the necessary processes are being carried out? Or are you concerned that this is now going to pass and people aren't going to get the answers that they so badly want?
Well, one of our worst fears is for Kensington and Chelsea to go back to business as usual, because it's that very business as usual that led to tragic consequences. So we hope that the local authority will agree to our proposals and work with us, because without the community, we won't be able to heal or move forward.
OK, Samia Badani, thanks very much for joining us this lunchtime. Appreciate your time there.
Thank you.
Now, a record number of disadvantaged school children in England are now going to university. However, new figures from the Department for Education also reveal private school pupils are still vastly more likely to go to the top universities, and the gap is widening. Now, almost 66% of pupils from private schools went on to study at a university. And I think we can get a bit more information on this now from our correspondent in Westminster, Lewis Goodall. And Lewis, I know that this is something that's very close to your heart. Will the government be forced to act on this?
Well, I think, first of all, the good news, and the government, I think, rightly points to this. If you look at the very poorest pupils, and a pretty good standard of that is the pupils who are on free school meals while they're at school, the number of those pupils going to university at all is gone up to 1 in 4, so a quarter, which is really good. And it's an improvement from 10 years ago when it was only 13%. So the government, I think, rightly is pointing to that as a success. I think where you're right, though, and where these figures are more worrying, is first things to say is, well, there are more private school kids going to university as well, full stop, because the number of places in higher education has just expanded a lot over successive governments. And the other thing to say, which you've already alluded to, is the top universities, so we're talking about Oxbridge and the Russell Group universities, they are increasingly being colonised by students who went to private school, and fewer people from poorer backgrounds, from state schools, and particularly on free school meals are going. So the latest figures, as you say, showing that that's widening. So almost 66% now of pupils from private schools are now going on to study at the top third of the universities, top third of higher education institutions, and that compares to only 23% from state schools. Now, some people might say, well, hey, look, a university is a university, a degree is a degree, and yes, of course, it is good that more people from all backgrounds are going into higher education, but I think what should worry ministers and what will worry them is that research increasingly shows it isn't just about where you go to university, it's about what you study and where you study, and particularly if you want to get into the top professions. So Sutton Trust research has shown recently that the top professions, whether it be journalism or the law or medicine, politics and so on, are increasingly dominated by private school pupils, and that is almost certainly as a result of the fact that they are increasingly dominating the top universities. So some of this will give some ministers cause for cheer, but there certainly will be many, including I'm sure in the Department for Education, who are worried about this, and lots of calls for them to act on it.
OK, Lewis, thanks very much for that. Now, the man leading the investigation into Donald Trump's presidential campaign in Russia has taken the first steps towards possible criminal charges. Calling together a citizens' body known as a grand jury will give special counsel Robert Mueller more legal powers. For more, we're joined now from Washington by our US correspondent Cordelia Lynch. And Cordelia, should President Trump be worried?
Well, he's not happy about this, as he expressed yesterday in West Virginia. But as his lawyer, Jay Sekulow, said last night, this isn't unusual. It was largely expected. It's very common for an investigation like this to use a grand jury to consider evidence, to speak to witnesses. They'll be working closely with Robert Mueller, who is very well respected. He's thorough, and this is part of that process. Nevertheless, though, Donald Trump is still dismissing the whole inquiry and the probe about possible connections between the Trump campaign and Russia. Here's what he had to say to his faithful in West Virginia.
We know there are powerful forces in Washington who want to stop us, but we won't let them. The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
There are a lot of avenues that Robert Mueller and this grand jury will now be pursuing, including potential financial ties between Moscow and the Trump campaign. That is something that the president is very against. He said that Mueller in the past would be crossing a red line if he does that. The focus will also be very tightly on the Trump Tower meeting in June, which was attended by Donald Trump Jr., by the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well, and exactly what was discussed there. Now, this grand jury ultimately will need to decide if criminal charges should be brought. It is not their job to conclude whether there has been any criminal wrongdoing. But clearly this isn't something that's desired. It's a further probe and lens on the Trump administration. We're going to hear in the next couple of hours from the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and his response to intense leaking that's taken place over the last few months. They are trying to get a grip on it, but as we've seen over the past few days, including this story which dropped last night, continually people are coming out with things that the Trump administration don't want them to.
Cordelia, thank you. You're watching Sky News. Let's find out now what's coming up in the sport.
Is Dunkirk good, Simon?
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. Let's cross over now to the Sky Sports News studio for an update from there.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
The world's most expensive footballer, Neymar, insists he hasn't moved to Paris Saint-Germain for the money. And a reminder tonight, the World Athletics Championships begin in London. Usain Bolt begins the defence of his 100 metres title, while Mo Farah will be looking to win his third 10,000 metre title. There's more on that and Neymar's move to PSG live now on Sky Sports News, and we're back at 3:20. See you then.
Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
Well, let's take a look at the weather now.
Whatever the weather, enjoy your holiday. Multitrip.com Travel Insurance, proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
Rain over Scotland will give way to showers as low pressure moves away towards Scandinavia. The northeast will stay breezy, but winds will ease elsewhere. That'll leave us with an afternoon of sunny spells and scattered showers. Most of the shower activity will be in the north, while southern areas will be more likely to stay dry and sunny. It'll be a cooler day for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but central, southern and eastern areas will be warm, with a daytime high of around 24 degrees Celsius, so 75 Fahrenheit. Overnight, showers will die back to the far north and west, but a new area of heavy showery rain will spread in across central parts of Ireland, reaching Wales by dawn. This will then spread eastwards, bringing the risk of heavy showers with hail and thunder to many central areas.
Multitrip.com Travel Insurance, proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up after the break, the terror plot ordered by an Islamic State commander foiled by police in Australia. Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. The top stories. The new Irish Prime Minister warns that time is running out for negotiations on Brexit in Brussels and calls for unique solutions to the issues it raises. Australian police say an Islamic State terror plot to place an explosive device on a flight from Sydney was among the most sophisticated attempts that they've seen. The man leading the investigation into links between Donald Trump's presidential election and Russia has taken the first steps towards making criminal charges. Well, more now on that story in Australia, and police there have revealed details of what they've described as one of the most sophisticated terror plots attempted on Australian soil. Investigators say a top Islamic State commander ordered a group of men to build a bomb to be placed on an Etihad Airways flight out of Sydney. Sky's Ashish Joshi has the latest.
The emerging details describe a sophisticated plot, and the country's threat level remains at probable, meaning an attack is likely. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Well, earlier on, we spoke to Sky News Australia reporter Caroline Marcus, who was in court.
In court today, the two men alleged to be behind it did not come up from the cells to hear the charges read out. They had a barrister instead in court for them to hear the next court date. He told media outside court that his clients still deserve a presumption of innocence, but would not say whether they planned to defend those charges. Now, the two men are Khaled and Mahmoud Kayat. They are believed to be related, and they're now facing life behind bars after each being charged with 2 counts of doing acts in preparation for a terror attack. Now, in court today, they heard that they would next have their case mentioned in November, so they will be in custody until then. There is a third man that is still in police custody. He has not yet been charged over these offences, but was arrested along with the other 2 men in those counter-terror raids across Sydney last weekend.
Caroline Marcus reporting there from Sydney. Now, Sky News has learnt increasing numbers of police officers are refusing to chase moped criminals as they fear they won't have support from senior colleagues if something goes wrong. Now, the problem is especially severe in London, where moped-related crimes have tripled in the last year. Our Home Affairs correspondent Mark White has been given exclusive access to the Met's Special Task Force tackling moped criminals.
In broad daylight, in the heart of London's Theatre District, 4 criminals on 2 mopeds are robbing unsuspecting members of the public. Mark White, Sky News.
The husband of a British Iranian woman in prison in Iran has told Sky News of his hopes for her freedom. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has been held since April 2016 on unspecified charges. Well, her husband Richard told me he hopes Foreign Office Minister Alistair Burt uses his visit to the country to raise Nazanin's case.
Nazanin, as you said, is a British-Iranian mother. She was over in Iran on holiday last Easter for a 2-week holiday with our daughter and was taken at the airport on the way home. Was later on sentenced to 5 years imprisonment on secret charges. We had an appeal that she lost, and then a further Supreme Court hearing which she lost. And she's been held in Evin prison, which is the main prison in Iran ever since.
And Alistair Burt in Iran today, what are you hoping is going to come out of this?
Well, so Alistair Burt, that's right, the Minister is meeting with Nazanin's family later on today, hopefully to reassure them that the government is doing everything it can. And then he will be meeting with Deputy Foreign Minister and with other Iranian officials ahead of President Rouhani's inauguration. So I'm just hoping that he just raises her case as much as possible, presses the Iranian government that this situation cannot continue and that she's innocent and that she should be released.
And, I mean, your wife was arrested more than a year ago. Do you feel the government should have done more here in Britain?
Well, I've had various complaints about the government. I think they sincerely care, and I think that Minister Burt has been very genuine in his concern. But yeah, my complaints have always been that they've never spoken out and criticised her treatment. They've never said that she was innocent, and they've never publicly called for her release. So those are 3 things that I keep pressing for them to do.
And your wife arrested on suspicion of plotting to topple the government. She was arrested with your daughter in Iran. What are her spirits like at the moment? Obviously, she's been in prison for well over a year now.
Yeah, so it's been a very, very long and hard time, and there have been ups and downs, and I think that's fair to say that at the moment she's in a very fragile state. She'd obviously had hopes to be home for Gabrielle's 3rd birthday, which was around the time of the elections here and there, which didn't happen. And yes, she's been to see a psychiatrist who said that she's got advanced depression. She's been talking in very dark tones about what she might do. And really, I think my job is to keep campaigning and to keep her knowing that we're all rooting for her, she's not forgotten, and that we'll try to bring her home as soon as possible.
And do you get the chance to speak to her frequently?
That's got better. For a long time I wasn't able to speak to her at all, but actually since they installed a phone in the prison ward that she's in, she's now able to call me once a week, which is a real blessing. It has transformed things hugely.
And of course she was arrested when she visited her parents in Iran. There have been various appeals, haven't there? But where do you go from here? Are there any more options?
Legally in Iran, no. We've exhausted all options as far as I'm aware. We've been to the Supreme Court and lost. We've obviously had a ruling by the UN Working Group, that said that her detention was arbitrary and she should be released. And there are various things we can do legally, internationally and maybe domestically. So we'll keep looking at options. But obviously, Minister Burt being there is a chance for him to press her case and hopefully bring her home before we need to do all that.
And what exactly are you expecting him to do?
Well, just to make it really clear that this situation is unacceptable and that she was a mother on holiday with a small baby and all those charges are nonsense and should be refuted. And for them to find a way to bring her home as soon as possible. It's almost 500 days she's been there. Well, Gabriella was only 600 and something days when she was taken in the first place. This has gone on for an inordinate amount of time.
And in terms of your daughter, is she still living with her grandparents in Iran, or is she back here with you now?
She's still with her grandparents. I've promised Nazanin that I won't do any decision without her agreement. So I've currently got a visa application in to try to go to Iran to discuss it with her. But at the moment, yes, she's been in Iran now for almost a year and a half. So she, calls her granny Maman, which is mum in Farsi, and has adapted to her life there, really.
And finally, from your point of view, just talk us through what the last year and a half has been like.
Oh, I'm in a whirlwind. Definitely a whole different reality that I didn't realise existed. I've learned an awful lot about Iran and a bit about the way government works here. I live it day to day and we'll get through it. And my job in many ways is just to keep tomorrow alive so that when she comes back, we can have a normal life again.
Richard Ratcliffe speaking there. Now, the 70th Edinburgh International Festival gets underway today. Rather than a celebration of high art, for the majority of visitors, nowadays it's all about seeing the comedy on the fringe. So is there still life in the old festival? Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer had the difficult job of finding out.
The festival was founded to provide a cultural lift to post-war Britain in Edinburgh.
Stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up, calls are increasing for the world's fastest man to be given a knighthood. Now, British athletes are among those leading calls to give Usain Bolt an honorary knighthood ahead of the final 100-metre race of his career. The Jamaican will be running in the London 2017 World Athletics Championships, which gets underway today. Bolt has won 8 Olympic and 11 World Championship golds, and he's eligible to receive a knighthood as a Commonwealth citizen. Well, former Sports Minister Richard Gavin has told Sky News that Usain Bolt is an obvious candidate for a knighthood.
I think, he is probably one of the greatest athletes that we've seen in our generation. You aspire and you do it in the way that Usain Bolt's done, you can also be recognised at the highest level.
Now, I have to say there has been a lot of debate about whether Usain Bolt should be honoured with a knighthood on Twitter. I've been asking for people's reaction. Mixed, I've got to say. Read you a couple. Chris Hawkins has said, why not? Jamaica is part of the Commonwealth, so yes. John Mick is saying no, not for running around. Keep your comments coming in at Rebecca TV News. Interested to hear your thoughts. Hopefully we can read a few more a bit later on. Staying with sport, though, and the Euro Dream ended last night for England's women's football team. But while they may have failed to win their match against Holland, they've gained plenty of new fans as support for them grows across the country. Our correspondent Enda Brady spoke to players from Northampton Town Ladies Football Club who've been watching the success of the England team.
Euro 2017 may have ended in tears for England with a heartbreaking semi-final defeat to add to their World Cup exit at the same stage 2 years ago. Enda Brady, Sky News.
Well, it's certainly looking a bit brighter outside. Let's see if it's set to continue. Let's take a look at the weather now.
A tranquil air rests over Doha as the sun shines bright above Miami.
Rain over Scotland will give way to showers as low pressure moves away towards Scandinavia. The northeast will stay breezy, but winds will ease elsewhere. That'll leave us with an afternoon of sunny spells and scattered showers. Most of the shower activity will be in the north, while southern areas will be more likely to stay dry and sunny. It'll be a cooler day for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but central, southern and eastern areas will be warm with a daytime high of around 24 degrees Celsius, of course 75 Fahrenheit. Overnight showers will die back to the far north and west, but a new area of heavy showery rain will spread in across central parts of Ireland, reaching Wales by dawn. This will spread eastwards, bringing the risk of heavy showers with hail and thunder to many central areas.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Here on Sky News, the Irish Prime Minister airs his views on the Brexit border debate. We will have plenty more on that and a lot of other stories coming up after the break, so make sure you stay with us.